that, things are way better now than they were when I was first starting, right? And it's not to say that it's easy. It isn't. We still got a long ways to go, but the doors open up a little bit more. So the big thing for me is keep heart, right? Keep ready. Treat what you're doing with the utmost respect that it deserves. Don't ever underestimate your abilities, but always keep moving forward. Take every opportunity you can to learn, right? It's a grind. Sometimes it is a horrible, thankless grind, but keep it up. I always say that my success sort of came because I was just too stupid and too stubborn to quit.
Welcome to Growth Untold, the podcast where we dive into thoughtful conversations and insightful discussions with world-class people, all with the aim of inspiring, educating, and empowering our listeners.
We are thrilled to have you here with us on this exciting journey to explore the diverse stories and the ideas that have the power to shape the world for the better.
Welcome to Growth Untold, the podcast.
Today we are dabbling into the world of acting with Canadian acting sensation. From the drama of Train 48 to the adventures of the Mandalorian to the laughs of Kim's Convenience, he has charmed his audience with his talent and infectious charisma. And with the knack of bringing characters to life, he has garnered numerous accolades, clinching the Canadian Screen Award for Best Actor in a Comedy Series, not once, not twice, but 4 times for his impeccable portrayal of Mr. Kim. And let's not forget his theatrical prowess, earning nominations for the prestigious Dora Mae Moore Award for stellar performances in The Monster Under the Bed and the stage rendition of Kim's Convenience. But Paul is more than a seasoned actor. He is also a master of versatility, from his recent work in the much-anticipated Netflix adaptation of Avatar, The Last Airbender, proving that his talent knows no bounds. So sit back, relax, and get ready to embark on a roller coaster ride of insights and maybe a few laughs as we dive deep into the world of Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Paul, welcome. It's awesome finally getting to meet you, man. Yeah. Both being Toronto actors, sometimes we don't always run into each other. Yeah. People disperse. Toronto actors disperse. So it's really nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
No, thank you so much for asking me to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. So I want to start off by asking you about like your early life, your family, your parents, where you're from. For people that might not know you, give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, I was born in South Korea, a little city called Daejeon, which is like 40 kilometers outside of Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea. And 3 months after I was born, my parents immigrated to Canada. And so I have an older sister. She's about a year and a half older than me. We immigrated here in like December of 1972. And we lived in London, Ontario initially. And then when I was going into grade 1, we moved to Scarborough, Ontario. We lived in Scarborough for a while, spent a year in Scarborough. And then after that, for grade 2 to grade 12, my parents moved out west to Calgary, Alberta. There was the oil boom, tail end of the oil boom then. And so we moved out there.
And what did they do? Like, why did they want to go out?
Well, so both of my parents were trained professionals in Korea, but they couldn't work in their profession in Canada because of the language barrier. And so, like, my dad worked as a janitor at, like, Western University, and my mom was a key punch operator at a factory. And, there's just more opportunities out in Calgary. And so they moved out there. My aunt on my mom's side had already moved out there. She was a trailblazer. She's the one who came to Canada and said to my parents, "You've got to move out here. This is great." So they followed her out here. It wasn't so great. And then she went out west. And she said, "You got to come out here. It's great." So my parents went out west. And, my dad got a franchise of a fish and chips restaurant. And so he opened up a restaurant there. And my mom was a manager of a Mac's store.
So they did both kind of get better jobs a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that was the whole thing. It was about finding something that was a little bit more self-sufficient than having to depend on somebody else to pay them, right? And so for my dad, being a restaurateur, it was his own business, and so he could regulate the hours and how much work he put into it. And it was like, high risk, high reward because you're paying yourself.
Exactly.
And so, and we were out there from grade 2 to grade 12. And then after I graduated from high school, it was a question of we're going to go to school. for my secondary education, and I ended up coming back here to U of T.
University of Toronto.
Yes, for those of you who are uneducated about that, it is University of Toronto downtown campus.
It is one of the best universities in the world.
Yes, and the reason I went there was not to get an education, but to follow my girlfriend at the time. So yeah, smart choices all around. And I've been here ever since. But this is also where, like, coming to Toronto was how I discovered the world of performance and acting, and the whole idea that this was possibly something I could do for a living. And and so that was.
And what did you go to U of T for? What program?
So initially, this is such a long story. Yeah, I was allowed to apply for 3 different universities in Ontario, and it was Carleton, York University, and U of T.
Okay.
And at the time, before I discovered acting, I loved drawing, artwork, and I loved writing. And these were things that my dad was kind of, low-key.
Hell no.
No, low-key supporting me.
He was?
Yeah,
Really?
he wanted
Wow,
me,
what a
me to be a
twist.
writer.
I
Yeah.
did not think that was going to go that way. That is a twist.
That's
Because
great.
my
That's
dad
awesome.
used to write a lot, and then he sort of was encouraged by his parents, no, you're not going to make a living from it. So he went the more traditional route. And I think low-key, he was kind of like, he saw that I enjoyed it. I was good at it. I was winning awards in high school for it. And he was like, yeah, no, you go write, do what you want to do.
Don't make my mistake.
Which I thought was really
Wow.
cool. And then when I went into acting, he was really upset. Because he was like, what are you doing?
He's like, I want you to be a writer. What are we doing?
Yeah. But it was funny. So I applied to Carleton because I wanted to get into journalism, to be honest, for a bit, because they had a really good journalism program. And then York was just another university. I thought, okay, I'll just apply for that. But when I got to U of T, initially it was going to be an English major with a fine arts minor. And I was going to learn, to be an artist and to draw better, like improve my technique.
Yeah.
And my plan was either to become a political cartoonist or just to just draw comics for a living and or do writing. You just, you're in high school, you're naive.
Yeah.
You're not really thinking about what's my long-term career
Yeah.
goals. It's like, what am I into? What do I like?
But at this point, acting wasn't really
No.
on your mind. Of course, art was, and you were
Yeah.
clearly an artist.
Yeah.
But acting specifically wasn't really on your mind.
Because it was never really an option that I was aware that was even open to me.
Right.
Growing up, when you don't see a lot of people who look like you, or you don't see a lot of success stories of people that look like you, you're like, well, this is an avenue, this is a career that's closed to me. Because obviously, no one's working who looks like me because there's no jobs for them. So you don't even think about it. And it's weird because TV and movies have played such an integral part of my life. Like I said, when we immigrated to Canada, like my parents, they would leave my sister and I alone. Like you could do that back then, right? Just leave your kids at home alone.
Yeah, and they
go
had
work.
to.
Yeah.
They had to go to work, yeah.
And so, like, the TV was my babysitter. That's how I learned how to speak English. I consumed so much content. A lot of it really good, a lot of it really bad, like stuff that you should not be seeing at that age. But I mean, it didn't twist me too much. And it was one of those things where you don't realize the power that TV or these mediums hold on you until you're much older and you look back on it and you reflect on how what you've seen really sort of shapes your tastes, your ideas about the world, societal norms, all these different things. They're just really, really sort of subtly imprinted on you at an early age. And so, like, at my age, I didn't see people that looked like me. And then the ones that I did see that looked like my family were often made fun of, ridiculed, were the odd ones, like we're strange, we're unreasonable. And so what that taught me was my family's story wasn't a desirable story, and it made me not want to be like my family. It didn't make me not want to be Asian. I didn't want to be Korean. I wanted to be normal like everybody else because I didn't want the reactions that I saw on television and the movies to happen to me.
Which in Canada back then, correct me if I'm wrong, because, we both felt this way growing up. We grew up in Markham, GTA, Greater Toronto area in the early 2000s. We wanted to be normal too, but what normal meant back then was, the mass, which was really just Caucasian kids, like we wanted to be like them. So even though when you're a kid, I firmly do believe you don't really understand race and you don't really look at things that way. But subconsciously, you're going, I need to be more white. Yeah. That's really what it's like,
And that's the dominant culture. So, I get that, right? It's not like it's a bad thing. Like, I don't necessarily look at that as bad in and of itself, but what it really tells me is that representation absolutely 100 million% matters, because when you don't see people that look like you succeeding or being respected or just being treated normally, like when you see people, Asian people were treated as other, and it's still like it carries over now. Like the Asian hate wave that happened during the pandemic is just completely symptomatic of it. Like people who've been living in Canada their entire lives and who just happen to be Asian are suddenly turned upon by complete strangers on the street because of the way they look and the blame and the anger that they're feeling because of COVID and the restrictions that it's placing on everybody and the hardships. And I get people feeling frustrated for that, but looking for a scapegoat or an outlet and seeing somebody who just looks Asian and wanting to blame Asia for, because everybody knows COVID came from Asia type thing, is so irrational, but it does point to the power of representation. And when you are fed that from celebrities, even everybody's saying, hey, well, one of our icons is saying it's okay, let's go, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, for Arabs too, I mean, 9/11, I was young when that happened, but it absolutely changed the way people looked at me.
Yeah.
And I felt that. And even now with what's happening, there's a big influence with what's happening in the media and people looking at Arabs differently now. And it's like every couple of decades, like the Arabs are looked at a little bit differently because of things that are outside of our control.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's Middle Easterns, North Africans living in North America their whole life. And all of a sudden, people around them just start looking at them a little bit differently because of what the media is saying, which is so messed up because we're all the same, man. Like we're all the same, especially in that region. Like we're all so similar, even when you look at like Greece and Sicily and Turkey and all these places, all giving influences to North Africa. So I agree with you 100%. Representation is so important, and that's one of the things in North America where you're like, the media still has a big influence on how we look at other cultures, and they can kind of skew how we look at other cultures.
Well, and that's the thing too, because there has been this. It started subtly at first, but now it's the concerted push towards negativity and controversy and clicks. Those things sell. So the more outlandish, the more outrageous, the more frightening it is, the more people will click on it. And that's content that we've been very slowly groomed to sort of accept at face value and to sort of like they seek that out.
Yeah.
Like you watch any other, a tamer example of this is like fandom. You watch any sort of show that's out there right now, the negativity surrounding that, you literally have people, content creators being paid money to destroy something. And so all semblance of, non-judgment or non-biased criticism is out the window.
Yeah.
And it's all like top 10 things I hated about this, or these are the reasons why this failed, or controversy surrounding this stupid mistake. And then you see that, and it's just a review on a TV show.
Yeah.
And you're like, and it's just for clicks. Click, 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 click. And we've moved away from the positivity. We've moved away from constructive, actual good criticism. Nothing is perfect, I get it, but like when we're focusing on things that we hate, things that don't work, of course and it just builds to this air of negativity where everybody's just like angry all the time.
You're 100% right, and I find it really interesting, especially being actors, because when I take a look at my career so far, it's like I had a $1 billion movie, I had a #1 film on Netflix, but the most media attention I got in my career was all negative.
Right.
And you take even a look at what's going on with Sydney Sweeney now, right? It was like very negative surrounding her. But I find in a weird way, the people that are the most successful can almost capitalize on the negative sentiment that's out there about them. Like they either have great teams that know how to twist it, or they just embrace the negativity in a way because the old saying goes, any publicity is good publicity. Right. So it's so interesting because, the negative publicity that I've had to deal with, it's really like put me in a dark place, made me shut down, made me want to disappear, made me want to just go in a corner and just, just away from it all. But I feel like the people who can capitalize off of it do really well, but it's so fucked up still. You're like, you're right. It's like all the positive stuff, nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Nobody ever wants to talk about that stuff. Yeah. It's messed up. It really is.
Or it's like leaving a review on Amazon or something like that, right? Like the people who take the time to do a review are angry or they're motivated because they got crossed or burned and they want to let everybody know. But the people who absolutely love it, they go, yeah, it did its job. And go, can you leave a review, please? Yeah, sure. And then they don't because they've got what they needed from it and they're happy with it, right?
Yeah.
And it's easier to just kind of go, well, no, I'm satisfied, so I'm good. I'll move on. So all you get are the people with an axe to grind, right? And people who are just like...
Do you think that'll ever change? Or do you think that's just how human beings are wired?
I would love for things... I think we are capable of changing that. I think this whole... Because I think ultimately that kind of behavior is self-destructive. And it's boring, to be honest. It's tiresome. I think everybody's starting to roll their eyes. They're starting to see that, okay, this is clickbait. And so I'm playing my little part. Like, if I see anything negative in something like that, there's an urge to like, okay, what's their beef? What's their problem? But a lot of times I go, no, I refuse to, and I'll just get rid of it off my algorithm.
Yeah.
I just say hide this. Like,
Right.
it's something that I think we can, like you say, we can use this and reframe the narrative. I think by what I try to do is I try to give out a sense of positivity, and I talk very openly about on every platform that I'm on, that I'm tired of this immediate hate. When your default is, I hate this, I feel bad for you. Because how can you enjoy things in life if your first instinct is to say, I hate it, and these are the things that I find wrong about it, instead of looking at some of the things that bring you joy, or that are good about it too, right? Nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
And so I would rather focus on the positive things first and kind of go, okay, is it perfect? No. This is what I really liked about it. Lead with that. And then you can start you seem a little bit more balanced when you start going, okay, here's some things, in my opinion, that I think they could work on or didn't quite work for me, instead of it being, and we've moved this way too, as a society, is my opinion is fact,
Right.
instead of just being an opinion. It is like, I believe.
And it matters.
Yeah.
And it always matters.
And it has more weight than anybody else, but my belief is 5 + 2 is 3. It's not 7, it's 3. Why? Because I believe that's the way it is. It's like, okay, so you went to school, you obviously passed math. No, I did not. But I believe this is what it is. You have people who are trying to discredit actual people who've studied their entire lives on a certain subject because they see a meme or a TikTok, because it speaks to them, and it's easier to believe the lie than to have to face the truth. And facing truths are hard. They're always really hard. It's because you have to put work into it. And you have to go, okay, this doesn't make my life easier, but I see the value in it and it makes sense, versus it's this person's fault. Fuck these guys. Yeah, man, fuck those guys. Let's go. And it's easier, and you can maintain living in that fantasy world and being guilt-free and not doing any of the work. But, anecdotally, oh, that makes much more sense. It makes me feel better. So let's go this way.
And speaking of truths, back to the truths of what acting was like for Asians early in the industry. You said Asians in a former interview were either the bad guy, the butt of the joke, or exoticized, right?
Yeah.
And so has that transformed? Has that truth transformed to a more positive truth? Or is that still, do you feel like there's some remnants of that still exist?
Absolute vestiges of that still exist. Yeah. Absolutely. We've come a long way, I believe. We still got ways to go. But I mean, I'm so overwhelmed at how much it has changed, even in my life, because I thought when I started off, I didn't think we would have this kind of representation in my lifetime. I was thinking maybe the next generation of actors, or the generation after that, it was going to be a slow, sort of painful, sort of, hey, let's humanize an entire culture of people, an entire race. Let's humanize them. And it just kind of happened so quickly, it seems, like almost overnight.
Well, you were at the forefront of that, I gotta say. Like South Korean content now, everybody now understands how incredible it is and how much talent there is in South Korea. But I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of Kim's Convenience. I'm proud of Canada, because you were at the forefront of that. I would say Kim's Convenience probably paved the way for all this incredible South Korean content that followed it. Squid Game after that, and a lot of this incredible content.
I think it's, thank you so much, first of all.
Of course.
Yeah, and I'll take that. Usually I don't take compliments very well. But I need to point out, though, that we were part of a vanguard. I think that started a few years earlier, because I want to acknowledge Fresh Off the Boat for being one of the first, since like All American Girl, to have an all Asian family sort of cast in a sitcom, and in a more realistic light than All American Girl. I think All American Girl That failed because they tried to hyper idealize the family and make them like they can do no wrong, and they're just playing into the tropes, of the model minority myth, right?
Right.
And I think had they been able to, I think Margaret Cho was under an immense amount of pressure to succeed, and people were telling her, no, you got to do this. I think if she knew now what she did back then, if she knew back then what she knew now, I think we'd have a very different conversation here. So fresh off the boat, they started out. No, Eddie Huang wasn't the happiest with the way he felt that they were still watered down, and it wasn't the purest representation of his family that he met out in his book. But baby steps. I think those are the things where it's like you put an Asian American family on prime time in front of people, and you start to normalize that existence, right? And then you had, of course, the runaway hit, Crazy Rich Asians, and I think that one was interesting because it really, really sort of first and foremost, it portrayed Asians to North Americans, at least, and Western societies, in a way that was, what? You mean they can be ostentatious and stylish and sexy, and I'm talking about the males as well as the females, and they could do all this stuff, and they have like white people problems still, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like that. But I think the pure cynicist in me, cynic in me, cynicist, that's not a word. Cynic in me is because these things made money. Right? Crazy Rich Asians doesn't make the money it does. We're not having this conversation.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Because we've been talking about, you talk about South Korean content being like amazing and the world embracing it and stuff like that. That content's been around for a while. And those in Asia, they already know. They're like, oh, these guys, we fucking listened to these guys like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were great. Like, welcome to the party, jerks, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it is that whole, it's like, oh, yeah, we can make money off of Asian people? Oh, yeah, let's diversity, inclusivity. This is what matters, representation. Because they're making money. Because I remember 30 years before, like, advocating for better representation and saying, just give Asian performers an opportunity to succeed and to fail at the same time. Give us the same chances as you're giving our peers, our non-BIPOC, like our white peers. That's all I ever wanted. It's like, don't hand stuff over to me because I'm Asian. Just give me the same chance, despite the fact that I am Asian. And let me fail, too. I'm learning, so I only get one chance, but my buddy who's white gets 5 or 6 chances, and they keep casting him. But as soon as I fuck up once, I'm out the door.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it was. And it's still kind of the way it is.
It still
now.
kind of is, for sure.
know?
100%, it still kind of is.
Yeah, and you said a good point there, that you said that there's less opportunities to succeed but more opportunities to fail because you are trapped in these roles that you're given opportunities for, right? And I feel like...
less opportunities.
Less opportunities, sorry. But I feel like there was some similarities, and I would love for you both to talk about it, of the start of your careers. You're like casted into these roles, and you kind of have to go along to get along, to get the next opportunity. And you both saw it as a means to an end. Like, it's the bridge to where I want to go. Do you kind of have that mindset?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you want to affect change in the game, you got to be part of that game, right? Yeah. And there's no, if you're on the outside looking in and screaming, you're powerless, right? And it is one of those things too. And just like pragmatically speaking, it's just like, got to eat.
Yeah.
I'm hired as an actor, right? If I don't take this part, somebody else will. And so I could be mad and, but high on my principles. I can't eat my principles. I can't feed myself with my principles sometimes. And so it's that sort of debate of, okay, well, how much am I willing to feel like a piece of shit so I can eat or build up credits on my resume so I can continue to work and maybe even start to get, be considered for better work. You need to build up your experiences. You got to get experience somehow, and you got to play that game. Right?
I mean, listen, ever since doing Aladdin, I've seen people comment on the stuff I've done, and to be like, I can't believe he's doing that kind of film. Like, why is he still doing these kinds of films?
Right.
And it's like, this is what you said. I'm like, I'm 32 now. Like, I'm getting married. I want to have a family. Like, I got to put food on the table. I can't just be at home waiting for the next big blockbuster movie and being like, no, I'm only going to do that. Like, at a certain point, too, you're like, this is the reality of it, man.
Yeah.
This is the reality of it. You have to wake up to the reality. If you're ethnic and you have a major hit, you're not always going to get the same opportunities following that hit as maybe someone else
Yeah.
would. That's just the reality of it, and I've got to keep working. I've got to keep flexing that muscle. I mean, that's the other thing that I've realized about acting, at this point in my career too. I would rather be on set on a project that others may deem not as like highbrow, but at least I'm flexing that acting muscle. Because at the end of the day, you've got to flex your acting muscle in some sort of way, whether it's at home auditioning, whether it's picking up an old Shakespeare monologue and working on it yourself, or whether you're on set. And of course, I would rather be flexing that muscle while I'm earning money on set than at home not. So, it's a tough thing being ethnic and being in Hollywood and trying to navigate the politics of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like now with social media, correct me if I'm wrong, it's gotten so political that you kind of have to like numb out the noise sometimes and just be like, I need to focus on what I love doing, which is the acting of it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing too, is there's so many voices that are out there right now. So many, anonymous posters or people who are just like, they have multiple accounts and they're like just trying to amplify what little voice that they have anyways, right? But it is about this whole, this whole feeling of entitlement where people feel the freedom to criticize every choice you make as an artist, as an actor, as somebody who's just trying to make a living too, right? And it's like, it's easy to sit back, lay back in the weeds and judge and scream about somebody's choices when you're anonymous and hiding back there. And it's like, well, what about your choices? Nobody else is under that kind of scrutiny, right? And I get it. Part of it is, that's part of the gig. You're in the public eye. That is true, and the fans make you. Just like the fans can break you too. And so I always try to maintain that level of respect towards fans. But at the same time, I am a human being. I'm a person unto myself, and I will make my decisions. And if you don't like the decisions that I make as a fan, realize this. I'm not doing it to piss you off. I'm not. I don't know you, really. And that's the choice that you're making, which is fine. If you don't like what I'm doing, feel free to follow somebody else or be a fan of somebody else, a proponent of somebody else. You're not, you don't belong to me.
Yeah.
I don't own you. Yeah. And so I'm going to do my thing. But at the same time too, it's like we work in the entertainment industry, right? There's different forms of entertainment. There's you can call highbrow entertainment where there's a message for everything positive. And there's stuff that's just fun to be in. And as performers, we're allowed to play in all these different areas, right? Because I was in Kim's, it's like, and I believe in representation mattering, and I try to speak about it as much as I can, really to sort of open the doors for the other artists behind me, to give them a better opportunity, but also to sort of, remind the fans that this is normal, like these kinds of families, and you can see the positivity that comes, and audiences win when different performers in front of and behind the camera, they get their opportunity to tell their stories. I mean, it's a diverse sort of storytelling pool, and different types of stories is a win for all audiences. I strongly believe in that. But at the same time, if I want to do a silly movie that has no redeeming qualities other than it makes you laugh and it's a silly romp, that doesn't disempower any of the other work that I've done or any of the other messaging that I want to give, right? And so if if people are like, oh, well, the kinds of movies that you're in, oh, you should be doing only these kinds of movies. It's like, well, says who?
Yeah.
Right? It says you? It's like, I'm sorry. I can't play Appa for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I love the character, but I'm not going to play that guy for the rest of my life. I'm not.
So talk to me about that, because, you've got a Blue Jays jacket on and you're from Toronto. And I often get asked, especially by Canadian artists, like, what's the difference between being in Toronto as an actor, moving to LA? Why did you move to LA? Why did you feel the need to go get your O1 visa and move to Los Angeles and all that? So talk to me about that, because I think we kind of lived in slightly different generations as actors. And in my generation, I just felt like, for me, being ethnic as an actor in Toronto, I felt like there's a ceiling here.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I hit that ceiling and then there's nowhere to go. So I've got to get myself to Los Angeles. And I was just psychotic about getting to LA.
Yeah.
Like I hired a PR agency to get all the right PR, my O1 visa, which I spent a ton of money getting.
Yeah.
I got rejected the first time for my O1. I applied again, and then I moved to LA. You know, I got psychotic about it because I just believed that wholeheartedly. Did you feel that as an actor in Toronto?
No. First off,
Yeah.
no, because I wasn't as ambitious. I come from a different generation, like you say, older school. So I was getting work here.
Yeah.
And so it was okay. And it was like back then, the type of work that I was doing, I was very frustrated early on when I was younger because I wasn't afforded the opportunities to audition for leads or even supporting characters. It was always principal, large principal, right? Maybe actor role every once in a while, like if I needed the money. But that was it. And I was content.
And give us a timeline. How old were you in
So
what?
this would have been in the early 90s, right? So we're talking about early 90s. And this was, okay, so this is before the CRT also changed the rules in 1999 to restrict CanCon. Basically, it was, back then there were a plethora of shows, Canadian shows, being shot in Canada for CanCon. For Canadian content that had to be shown during prime time. So we had it was a boom for Canadian industry, acting industry. And there were a ton of shows that were Canadian that were being shot here. And it was like, why do I need to go anywhere else? There's plenty of work, right? Which is awesome. Then in 1999, the CRT, they loosened the restrictions. And then boom, all these Canadian shows started getting canceled because Canadian networks didn't have to produce them, right?
And so I want you to keep going. So basically what you're saying is there was an essential mandate for networks in Canada to show a certain amount of Canadian content. They couldn't just import American Hollywood content.
Exactly.
They had to produce and show Canadian content. So that naturally drives the amount of content being produced in Canada.
And so we had a very robust, healthier domestic production in Canada. We were telling our own stories. They were being broadcast on our networks and this and that. Now, we're in a unique position because we are so geographically close to the United States, which cranks out so much content. And once the CRTC regulations loosened, and you didn't have to have as much Canadian content, the networks were falling over themselves, trying to buy American content. Because it was like, well, why should we pay money for these Canadian shows when we can pay all this money for an American show, which is a bona fide hit? We can play it, we can simulcast it over our networks. We'll hit those ratings. We'll get lots of advertising revenue from it, and we'll just make money.
And quite frankly, we don't have to do as much. We just buy.
We
just write a check.
But we were the only nation in the world that was overpaying. We were paying so much more than every other country in the world for that American content. Like, it was crazy how much we were overpaying for it. And then you look at other nations, like Australia, right? They have a very, very robust, in like their own domestic shows, and they have a star system, and they really tout, their production.
Look at the UK. I mean, look at the UK. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the best actors in the world come out of the UK, but it's because they really, really hone their own talent and they have their own industry.
They invest in it. They're very, very strongly believe that we'll create our own stories. We will feed our own industry. Whereas in Canada, the push for that. How many Canadian network shows are there, like that are Canadian? They originate in Canada. Canadian stars in it, funded and played during prime time in Canada.
Well, and the other thing is, you become a Canadian star, like Ryan Reynolds, Seth Rogen. You end up leaving, and you pretty much never come back ever.
Because and you said it too. It's the opportunities are far greater in the States. So when we were doing Kim's, so there's a guy I worked with. His name was Simu Liu, and he was same thing, crazy to get to the States. And I was always like, well, you're on a hit show here. Like, what's the big deal? Now, I'd never been to LA before. At that point, I'd never been there, and we went for the first time in 2018 for the Unforgettable Gala, and that got the ball rolling for my involvement in the Mandalorian, right? And so I met Deborah Chow down there, and Deborah's from Canada. She's from Oakville.
Wow.
And I met her 25 years before working at the Factory Theater. And so she was up there, down there, working on the Mandalorian, said that Dave Filoni was a big fan of my work on Kim's Convenience, blah, blah, blah. All this shit happened. It was like, oh, my God. And so I came back to L.A. just on my own, had a bunch of meetings with a bunch of people. You do the meetings.
Yeah,
right?
the meetings.
And it suddenly dawned on me, like, how much more opportunistic and how much more people were willing to listen to your ideas. It just felt so much more. This is the way I describe it. In Canada, say you have an idea for a show or a movie, and you go to your friends in Canada, you go, here's my idea. And we go, oh yeah, sounds like it's going to be really hard to make. It's like, and everybody will come up, it's like negative clicks. It's like, there's going to be this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. How do you, like, it's going to sound like, can we change it so it's easier? Whereas you go to the States, it's like, how do we make this? Okay, what do we need to do to make this? Let's make this.
Right.
And it's just that subtle shift. But it's more of the whole, we can make this.
Yeah, and and maybe I was wrong for this, and sometimes I do feel like, I have my artistic side of my brain and the business side of my brain,
Right.
and I tend to think they're pretty equal, and sometimes one side takes over more than the other. And the other thing I thought about too, because I started doing a research on all these numbers, and I don't know if you want to talk numbers, but I will just for a second so people understand. In Canada, you hit a show. So I was a series regular on a show called Open Heart, which was the same producers of Degrassi. I did 12 episodes. I made $12,000 for the whole show.
Yeah.
The whole show. In Hollywood, if you book a series regular on a TV show, back when I first moved to LA in 2017 and I tested for my first TV show, I didn't end up booking, but I tested for it. My starting quote was $35,000 an episode. Yeah. So if I would have done 12 episodes, you're talking about like over $400,000. Yeah. I made 12. 12. So you're talking about $400,000 versus $12,000.
And it's $400,000 American
dollars.
Yeah. Right? And so it's like almost $1 million Canadian.
And so that was my thing too. That was my thinking too. And I love Canada. Like I came back, I sold the show here, Evolving Vegan. Like I love it and I will continue to do that.
Yeah.
Because like we said, I hate it when big Canadian stars that are so talented and amazing go to the States and never come back. But I was thinking of it that way too, is like acting is hard. This industry is tough. But at the end of the day, an audition in Canada is the same as an audition in America.
Yeah.
It's going to take the same amount of work from me. I'm going to get rejected the same way. I'm going to feel the same shitty way getting rejected in Canada as I will in America. But the payoff difference was enormous. Yeah. So I was like, I got to get myself to the States, because if I'm going through this shit here for $12,000, I'd rather go through that shit there for $400,000. And that, did you ever think about that, or was money never really something you thought about, and it was all about the acting for you?
I feel so dumb, because I like, there's a reason why I think we grew up kind of poor.
No, you're just more artistic.
Yeah, no, well, there are things that like I just don't were never a priority. I was making some money, and in my mind it was good enough, because it kept me fed and rent was paid for, and the whole idea of savings and like letting your wealth grow for you are still really alien to me,
right?
And stuff, because it's old school, park it in the bank and just pray, just like nothing bad happens.
And when you're getting paid to do what you love, it doesn't, for a lot of people, it doesn't matter how much you're getting paid. You're like, I'm getting paid to do what I love. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
But
there's certain lines. I mean, like the amount that you're talking about, I think is absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, it's you're just getting union scale at that point, right?
Yeah, it was union scale. It was just per day.
But you're the lead in a television series.
Series regular,
right?
not a lead, but still,
you're still a series regular, right? Yeah. And so it's like, this is why we don't have a star system in Canada. But it's like, I'll tell you, for Kim's convenience, I remember, it started off as a play, and even as a play, I wasn't getting paid what I was worth. And this is something that's big in Canada. Artists not being compensated for what they bring to the table and what they're worth, right? We are at a very young, and I truly believe this, and I don't care if I'm pissing off producers or whatever, but it's kind of this whole idea of keep everybody super humble and just grateful that they're working, so we can play most favored nations, or just say, this is what you're getting. So if you don't want it, somebody else can get it, and they play that power. And so the power of saying no is huge. So we did Kim's Convenience, and it started off as a play, and it was a fringe play first, because Ince Choi, who wrote it, shopped it around to all the theater companies in town. They all said, no, we don't want to produce a play about immigrants. We don't see it. It doesn't work for us. And they're just reading the script, not even seeing it. So,
yeah, and to be frank, a lot of people that go to theater in Canada, are older Caucasian people. They're the ones who go to Stratford and the Shaw Festival, and the ones who are like buying season tickets.
We don't see our audiences wanting to support this type thing. And so that's why it became a Fringe show. And it becomes a huge hit at the Fringe Festival. Then all these theater companies, they come knocking on the door saying, we would love to present Kim's Convenience on our stages, right? It's that whole, it made money, let's go, like Crazy Rich Asians.
And it ticks a box.
Yeah, boom. So let's do this. So we went, and we ended up going with Soul Pepper Theater Company. Great move, smart move. Soul Pepper, they did a fantastic job promoting the show, building the show, growing the show. But I was getting paid less than $1,000 a week to do that show. And we did like 9 shows a week because they rode that show as much as they could. They sold over $1 million worth of tickets on that show.
And you got paid $9,000?
I got paid $1,000 a week for however long it was. Like, I actually went into debt doing that show because we did a national tour and we have some time, built in there so we could be with our families. But that time built in meant we couldn't get out of the work, right? Because it's like there's no job in the world that's going to be 2 weeks worth. Maybe you book something, but then the schedules change, so you're really out of contention for anything else. And so it's the money that you would save up would be spent in those 2 weeks because you're only making $900 a week. And then, so I went into debt, like serious debt, waiting for this TV show because we knew it was going to be made. And I was like, okay, that's when I get paid. When the show's being made, it's going to be like I'm going to be the lead on the television series.
And who promised you that? Who promised you that you would be the lead on the TV show?
That's the thing. So they, so one of the producers said, at Soul Pepper, we have, we have, it's a favored nations thing. Everybody gets paid the same. And there's a formula that they use. And, it was then, this is back then, this is back in the day. And it was like based on years of service, how many shows or this or that you had. But I was told, like, do you think you're worth more than some of the stalwarts at Soul Pepper Theater Company at the time, right? This person, do you think you're worth more than this person? And that was kind of like, for me, I was like, well, not in a regular show, but I think in a show like Kim's Convenience, this actor can't play this part, that actor can't play this part. But, I'm Canadian, I'm not going to rock the boat. And it was also held as like, well, we can cancel the rest of the tour and it's going to put all these other people out of work. There are all these different...
They're shaming you. Yeah, they're shaming you.
And so it's like, okay, I guess I'll just do it. But I'll wait. And when it's time for the TV show, gloves come off and I'm going to get paid, right? And so we, they're making the show. There's nobody else for the part of Appa. There's nobody else. And so I'm in a great position. And the first offer that comes through, $50,000 for 13 episodes.
For the whole show.
For the whole show, $50,000. And I was beyond insulted. I was like, are you kidding me?
And you have to commit your life to this. Like, that's basically your whole year, scheduling. You can't do other things.
And I get the game because that's producers' jobs to try to get you for as cheap as possible, right? But that was borderline like, okay, I know that's more money than I've ever seen before in my life in the theater, like, because I didn't go to Stratford, never went to Shaw. I wasn't in that echelon of actors. But for this particular show, I had a certain set of skills and an intimate knowledge with the character that I helped develop and, in fact, had a huge hand in creating on the stages. There's nobody else. So if you don't want to play with me, then you're screwed in a way. And so obviously we didn't go with that shitty first offer, right? And my agent was like, they always do this. Don't worry about it. We'll get you paid. And so I got more than that, but not like significantly
Not
more.
American money.
No,
where you would have probably
even.
been making $100,000 an episode as the outright lead in a hit show like that.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. That first year, I made $150,000.
Yeah.
For that first year of Kim's Convenience. And then after that first season hit,
it's not a lot, man. You're talking about like 10,000 episodes.
Yeah,
like it's not a lot.
A little more than 10,000 per episode.
I know non-actors will be listening to this because we've heard it all.
Yeah.
Other actors have come out and talked about numbers and they'll be like, "What are they complaining about? They get to act." But I trust me, it's not a lot of money when you hear about the actual numbers people get, it's not a lot of money. I made as much money in Aladdin as I did serving at a restaurant. People think I became a millionaire off of that film because it made $1 billion.
Yeah.
And I made just as much money as I did working in downtown Toronto for a full year serving, waiting tables.
Yeah.
So it's all perspective, right? It's all perspective.
Yeah. And so the comparables, when you look at that too, you're like, okay, so the first year was gangbusters, right? Award-winning, right? And so they come back and they say, okay, well, let's renegotiate. Because it was originally like a 4-year option or something like that. So we'll bump up your pay. Well, effectively, we'll double what we're paying you, but you're going to give us 2 more years of control on the back end, right? Like we'll extend your option by 2 years. I thought, yeah, at the time, it was just like we could have just played out the string and kind of gone, no, we'll see what happens in 4 years and then get ready to pay. But it was like that whole trading up in terms of just job security. We knew what was going on. So it was like,
athletes do the same thing.
Yeah.
So athletes will extend their contracts the minimum amount of years, and they'll get more money because they also don't know. I might get injured. I might, you know what I mean? So it's the same thing with actors.
So it was like that. It represented an amount of stability, financial stability. It was more money than I'd ever seen before. And I wasn't thinking about, well, what are the comparables for the other shows and stuff, right? Wasn't thinking that way. Because I didn't think it was fair at the time to compare myself to the lead in another show, right? Until I found out how much they were making. And I was like, what the fuck? What is wrong with me, right? That was so dumb. But it is, and that's the choice you make, and you kind of go, okay, my family's going to be okay for the next, not for the rest of our lives, but it gave us breathing room, which was great. And but then I'd heard like some of the other cast members had immediately just grabbed that first initial shitty offer, right? And then you kind of go, wow, when you put that into perspective, and it's the same thing. So like for Mandalorian, I made more money doing 2 episodes of that later on, not in season 1. I made no money, or season 2. I made no money. Like I wasn't part of SAG. It was just this other, like, just happy to be there. Happy to be there. But for season 3 of Mandalorian and for Ahsoka and stuff, like I got paid. And it was just like, oh wow. And for Avatar too, like I got paid more money doing less work on one of these shows than I did for the entirety of Kim's Convenience. Right.
And that's the difference between the Canadian market and the American market. And, you can argue that the money you made later on kind of compensated for the money that you didn't make, early on.
And that's the thing. Kim's Convenience made everything else possible.
Exactly.
Right? So you invest in the work, and, and it's not like we were being robbed or this or that. We were being paid quite well for Canadians. Being paid quite well. And to expect an American system of payment in Canada on Canadian shows is unfair and it's unrealistic. We were doing well by Canadian standards, we're doing really, really well. But that's also part of the problem when you have to use the term in Canadian standards. Because as you spoke to before, there's a big talent drain of people who leave in Canada to go to the States because the opportunity is greater, the pay is greater. And there is more of a breadth of work and possibility for work in the U.S. than it is in Canada because our domestic production up here is, I'll say, it's shameful. I love Canada. I would rather live here and make a living here than anywhere else in the world. And it kills me, the fact that I have to fly away from home to have my career grow in the way I believe it should. Like the potential for career growth is by a factor of 100 in the U.S. Even if I were to create and film my own show here, there would still be I'm still hitting the upper limits, and that's about it. That's as far as I can get in Canada, right? Whereas in the U.S., you can, for lack of a better term, you could build empires down there if you create and you act in and you make your own show and it runs for a number of seasons down there. You have enough FU money that you can start your own production company. You can start making your own stories and commissioning things. Like you can build your own studios, which a lot of people do down there because they have enough seed money from the work that they've done. But it's very difficult to do that in Canada. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, and listen, that's not to say that when you're first starting out, it's hard in the States as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I said, for Aladdin, at the end of the day, and I always kind of say this because people, like we're talking about, it's going to be so ironic, people taking clips of this and, like, bashing it, because it's going to be exactly what we talked about at the beginning. It's going to be so ironic, but it'll probably happen. But I always say this because I always like to kind of bring it back to taking accountability.
Yep.
And even though I didn't get paid that well on something like Aladdin, I would have done it for free.
Yeah.
I would have.
I hear you.
I would have still taken it and done it for free for the chance to get to act with one of my idols, Will Smith, and get to, like, improv with him and get to scene work with him, get to do this movie with, like, Will Smith and Guy Ritchie. I would have done it for free.
Yeah.
But the studios know that, and they take advantage of it, and they absolutely squeeze every last drop they can, and that's why they're big studios. Yeah. That's why they're multi-billion-dollar companies. You don't grow a company to be one of the top companies on the S&P 500 without squeezing every last drop that you can out of the lemon. You just don't. And so I like to say that, yes, I take accountability. I would have done it for free, but at the same time, like, you know, there's a little bit give and take. Movie goes and makes $1 billion. Kim's Convenience wins all these awards. Like, give back to your people a little bit more. Make them feel good about, you know, the hard work that they put in, the sweat and the tears, everything that they brought to it. Because as artists, we give everything to the roles we do. Like, we give it all. We bare our souls. Like, and so there's a little bit of give and take, and I think that's what I would say I wish just happened more, that both sides kind of met each other a little bit more in the middle than they do.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
So talk to me about The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Like, incredible project, of course. Are you enjoying doing it? How did it come about? Because you said that you met... You said that this has been in the works for like 25 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. So I met Deb Chow when I was working at the Factory Theater back in the, like, mid-90s, right? 94, 95. I was working at I got a government grant to learn about arts administration, and it was at the Factory Theater. And at the time, Factory was going bankrupt. And so all the shows had been canceled. The theater had been shuttered. They were in limbo. They didn't know if it was going to actually fold or not. And Ken Gass, who was the former artistic director, came back. And Ken, coincidentally, was my first-year acting instructor at University of Toronto. At the UC Drama program. And so I was there, and I was supposed to learn about arts admin, and there was nothing to administrate. And so, like, I was put to work as general laborer, basically. I cleaned up a lot of rooms. I did a lot of painting, a lot of reorganizing, just real, like, scut work.
Yeah.
And Deb was working there as an administrator. And so I met her there, and she was, you know, super cool back then, this really cool goth chick who had a really scary-looking boyfriend who was super sweet. And she wanted to be a filmmaker. And one day she said, hey, I'm shooting a short film. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, yeah, I want to be an actor. So let's do this. So we spent a day in Chinatown along Spadina, and it was all MOS. So no dialogue. And I played this, like, detective, this old gumshoe who had a trench coat and a fedora. And I was looking for somebody. So we spent a day shooting. It was great. And then she disappeared. She's gone for 25 years. Didn't see her again until I'm at the Unforgettable Gala. And this woman jumps in front of me and says, Paul, do you remember who I am? And it's Deb. I'm like, oh, my God, Deborah, yes, I remember you. Where the hell have you been? She said, you remember that short film? That short film got me to Columbia Film School in New York.
Wow.
I learned the craft. I became a filmmaker. I tried to get work in Canada as a director, and there weren't very many job opportunities. She did a couple of little things, but then went to the States and then ended up getting work as a director on shows like Better Call Saul, Fear the Walking Dead, Jessica Jones. And she said, I'm working on a show right now called The Mandalorian. And I was, oh my God, you're working on The Mandalorian? That's amazing. She said, yeah, I've been trying to get in touch with you because Dave Filoni is a big fan of Kim's Convenience, and he wants to write something for you. And I was like, get the fuck out. Are you serious?
And you're a Star Wars fan.
I'm
a massive fan.
Huge fucking Star Wars fan since I was 5 years old. And I remember I grabbed her arm and I said, you do realize I have like 9 cosplays of like Star Wars costumes at home, like ready to go. She's like, what? I said, yeah, I'm a member of the 501st Garrison, which is a group of dedicated cosplayers who raise money. They have screen accurate costumes they raise money for children's foundations, right? And so Lucasfilm, they sort of turn a blind eye to them because technically all these costumes are copyright infringement, but they'll turn a blind eye to it as long as you don't make money off of it. So
it's all going to donation.
They all donate it all, and it's a bunch of nerds dressed up in plastic space armor, and they do things for charity. And so she's like, send me the pics. So I show her all the pictures on my Instagram page. She's like, oh my God, I'm sending these to Dave. She texts Dave. Filoni texts back saying, well, he can just show up to work in those costumes type thing. And she says, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, oh, fuck, I got to go back to Toronto. She says, oh, I was going to invite you to come and visit the set. And I said, can I come back in like a couple of weeks? She said, yeah, absolutely. So I did that. Came back a couple of weeks later, got to watch Deb work. I met Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni.
Oh, my gosh.
I got a tour of it. I saw Grogu for the first time before anybody else because they're shooting season 1. I was like, I lost my mind over that. Hung out at the props department, hung out in the costume shop, did all these really super nerdy things. And to cap off the day, Filoni took me out for dinner, and I got to have dinner with her and with him and Deb, and we just hung out and like just died in nerd heaven, right?
Wow.
And then 6 months later, I got a call from my agent saying, so Lucasfilm is calling, and they want to know what your availability is. Right.
Wow.
And that's how it got started. I didn't have to audition for anything. It was just they were shooting season 2 and they thought of me, and
That's incredible. That's incredible. But by the way, just because you didn't have to audition for that, I mean, that's all the decades of work that you had put in. At a certain point, those are the seeds that you're sowing for tens and tens of years, doing this. And it's always a good feeling when that happens. Doesn't mean you still don't audition for other stuff.
No.
What I mean? Because that's what other people think too. They think like, oh, you did this big thing, you never have to audition again. It's like, no, the industry has gotten so competitive and so saturated with people. You do have to watch your back because people will do what you want to do for free. They will do it for free. They will die to have that opportunity. So it doesn't mean, you still don't audition. You do for the things that are really big, the things that you really want. But once in a while, it's nice to get that call. It makes you feel like, oh man, all those years of like hard work, like, wow, thank you. Like you thank God, thank the universe, like thank you. It's a nice kind of reward. Yeah. A nice little reward.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this for a second? Our editor just threw this to me. What walk us through what this is.
Oh yeah.
Is that a challenge coin? Yeah, okay. So this is it. He's got a challenge coin, 501st. This is a Legion coin. And there you go. It started off in the US. There's a guy named Albin Johnson who started it off. And basically it's Empire only. The Rebel Alliance is something completely different. So 501st, Vader's Fist. In canon, that is Darth Vader's, his battalion. That's his dedicated group of troops. And so the cosplayers have basically, they've used that, they've co-opted that term, and they are Vader's Fist. Started off in the States. Now it's spread throughout the world. There are different chapters, different garrisons, different legions. They're all under the one banner of the 501st Legion. And there's an exacting standard. So if you want admission into the Legion, there's certain criteria you have to meet, like age. You have to be at least 18 years old. There's a costume that you want to submit for your membership. They have something called the CRL, which is a costume reference library, where they have any number of different Imperial costumes that you can choose. So you can pick something really easy. You don't have to go full TK armor. You can pick, a lot of people go with the TIE Reserve pilot. And basically what it is you're wearing the TIE pilot's jumpsuit with the correct jack boots, correct gloves, gauntlets, and the correct cap for it, and everything in the comm badge, and it's really, really simple, entry level, and then you're a member. And so what happens is you submit photographs of you in your costume, and there's a garrison liaison officer who will study the costume to make sure it is screen accurate and checks off all those things. And if there's something off, they'll send it back and say, you need to fix these things before we accept you into the Legion. And if you fix them and you pass muster, they say, congratulations, you get to pick an ID number, and then a membership number, and then you're in the Legion and you can start trooping. These are challenge coins, which are started in the military, I believe, But garrison members, they carry them around all over the world. You should have one on you at all times. And basically, what it is if you're with a group of garrison members and somebody puts the coin on the table, everybody's got to put their coin out. And if you don't have one, you got to buy everybody a drink. Round of drinks.
Amazing.
And so that's what it's become. But, but they are dedicated for raising money for charity, children's charities all around the world. And in fact, May the 4th is coming up, Star Wars Day, and they have a podcast-a-thon that's going to be happening. And again, there's going to be a QR code. And they do this every Star Wars Day, and they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars for these charities.
You know what I've realized, Paul? You've worked on some incredible projects, but I feel like the universe has brought them your way because you're incredibly passionate about them. Seriously, you're not just an actor who's like booking work. Like you look at the big IPs you've worked on, Kim's Convenience. Yeah. You started off on that, making $900 a week doing the play, right? And then you did the TV show, and that was kind of a little bit of the universe rewarding you. You've been obviously a massive Star Wars fan your whole life. Yeah. And full circle moment again, you met Deborah, 25 years prior to that, huge Star Wars fan, and the universe rewards it a little bit. And it doesn't reward it after a year or a month. It's like after decades of doing these things. Yeah. But the reward is big, but I'm sure your sacrifice was big as well, and the time that you put into these things was a lot of time. And I think that's such a good lesson because I always talk about like manifesting and really envisioning yourself doing certain things. And you've certainly done that with, the big properties that you've kind of gotten to work on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the funny thing. I mean, with all that's happened and the things that I've had to go through and the journey along the way, it's hard not to sort of say the universe is random. Because I like after all that, it's like, all these things had to happen for my path to lead up to this point. And even then, I never, as a professional actor, you're like, hey, I'm working. I'm just happy to consider myself a crafted professional actor. And, you see, they're making these Star Wars, they're making the first live action Star Wars television show. And I never even dreamed that would be a possibility for me, even though they're shooting in North America or this or that. You kind of go, it might as well be on the moon. Yeah. Because it's so far away. I'm this little Canadian actor. What am I supposed to do? Like, how is this? So you don't even think it's going to happen. And then it just kind of, at the end of the day, it drops in your lap, but it's based on seeds that were planted 25 years before of just being a decent human being, right? Like, Deb was so awesome to me, right? And it's just like, can you imagine if I'd somehow, been a jerk to Deborah? Or been like, oh, you think you're a filmmaker, and just sort of like, no, I'm not going to be in your stupid film, or whatever, and blown her off. Like, that would have been absolutely, it's like all of this.
Well, and the fact that you guys didn't even keep in touch.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't even keep in touch. This was just like 25 years later. Like, you both went your separate paths. Yeah. You both did incredible things, but then it came back around. And I won't bore you with the story, but, I always talk about if I hadn't booked Jack Ryan, the producers of Aladdin wouldn't have seen my tape. I wouldn't have booked Aladdin. So, man, I'm a big believer that the universe is not random. It is not random. Sure, random things happen.
Yes.
But for the universe, it's probably not random.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in terms of, this podcast is all about celebrating diverse voices, and we're grateful that you came on the show. What kind of advice do you have and it's across multiple industries, like obviously acting is the industry that you are in, but any advice for people who are aspiring actors, journalists, working in sports who are ethnically diverse, that perhaps that the room doesn't look like them?
Yeah.
And they're trying to enter that room.
That, things are way better now than they were when I was first starting, right? And it's not to say that it's easy. It isn't. We still got a long ways to go, but the doors open up a little bit more. So the big thing for me is keep heart, right? Keep ready. Treat what you're doing with the utmost respect that it deserves. Don't ever underestimate your abilities, but always keep moving forward. Take every opportunity you can to learn, right? It's a grind. Sometimes it is a horrible, thankless grind, but keep it up. I always say that my success sort of came because I was just too stupid and too stubborn to quit, right? And that's a thing. And along the way, too, it is about sometimes being fluid with where you're at. sometimes what you want isn't directly in front of you. And so I shift my sights to what is adjacent to it, or what can get me close enough to being where it originally wanted, to keep me satisfied in the moment, right? And so like I looked at my career and I thought, well, I'm never going to be a lead actor. I'm never going to be number one on a call sheet. But what's available to me right now? Character actors, like expositionary characters. Well, I'm going to be the best at that then, right? And then hopefully I can build from there. Like it's always steps. When the road directly in front of you is blocked, find ways around it, and always be ready. My big thing is I never ever wanted anybody to wait for me. I hate that. I hate being unprepared. I hate showing up. And you've probably been on set too, where it's like somebody's didn't do their homework, and we're all waiting for them to sort of get in gear or to get ready and stuff like that. And it's like, this is your job. Like you need to show up prepared. And as actors or performers or artists of color, it is incumbent on us to be, and it's hard, but to be the best we can be at all times, to be ready for your moment, because these opportunities, you never know when they're going to show up. And if they show up, what a shame it would be to not be ready for that and to capitalize on that. And that means a constant state of just preparedness, professionalism, but above all, too, kindness. That's the biggest thing. I think being kind has gotten me further than my talent in so many aspects, because if it comes down to two people who are equally talented, you don't want to pick the asshole, right? You want to pick the person that is, wants to be collaborative, that is listening, that is a team player, that wants to, do the best that is self-sacrificing in a sense, so to serve the story or the narrative that's being told, and to have that ego where it's like, okay, they understand their part in it, to have a healthy sense of self-ego, but at the same time, something that is not detrimental to the project. And it's a fine line to balance sometimes. But the biggest thing is just keep heart, keep at it, treat it with respect, and learn as much as you can while you're on the way. And if times are tough, and they're going to be, surround yourself with those who can support you, right? Like-minded individuals. Lift each other up. Surround yourself with people who, if one of you wins, you all win, right? And then when you get to that next level, to always remember to try to do that little extra to help those behind get through as well, right? The modicum of success I've had, I've tried to parlay into really advocating for bringing up that next generation or my peers who haven't had the fortune of having the same opportunities as me. And I see people who are far more talented than me not get their breaks or not be at the right place at the right time. And I think for me, then it's my job, if I'm ever in that position, to help them out, to just nudge that door open a little bit more, suggest them, bring them along, and give them their opportunity, right? Not to do it for them, but it's like to give them the opportunity, because that's what we all want. At the end of the day, give us the same chances as everybody else, and let's bet on ourselves. Make it easy to bet on yourself.
All the stuff we talked about before, we're sitting here in Toronto, in Canada. You're wearing a Toronto Blue Jays jacket. We're proud Canadians.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the people that you love most, you're a little bit hard on, because you want them to do better. You want it to improve. Yeah. And just because we're saying all this stuff about Canada doesn't mean we don't support it or we don't love it. It's quite the contrary.
Yeah.
It's quite the contrary, because we know the potential here. All the greats like yourself, like, Seth Rogen, Jay Baruchel, Sandra Oh. Yeah. There's so many incredible Canadian actors. And I think Canada's just has so much talent, so much potential, but there's always ways to improve. There's always ways to give back. And like I said, meet in the middle somehow. And I think it's important too for younger generations just to understand like the business side of it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Listen, I have a lot of friends, incredible Canadian actors, who never left. They never wanted to take that chance and leave to the States. And that's fine too. That's okay. That they make the Canadian industry great. And everybody is allowed to just make their own choices, but I think it's important to understand the differences. What are the differences between the two markets? Why do people leave Canada? Mm-hmm. Why do they go to the States? Why do they not come back sometimes? And I know for me personally, I'll continue to do my best to come back and create content in Canada, because I think it's important. I think like the like the Brits show us, what a thriving industry it
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. You need a populace, you need a government that's willing to invest in that as well, to sort of bank on us being able to tell our stories in the best possible way and to equip us to succeed. That's the other thing too. I mean, there's a in my opinion too, if I didn't care about Canada, I wouldn't be talking about Canada. I'd be living in the States.
Yeah.
I'd be doing all these things. I love Canada. I've talked about how proud I am to be Canadian, especially when I'm in the US. I'm always like, I'm Canadian, I'm Canadian, I'm Canadian, right?
Yeah.
But I will talk about how disappointing it is that I have to go abroad in order to make a living.
Yep.
And I think it, like you said, it's a shame because we have the best crews in the world up here, the infrastructure up here. We've got fantastic producers. Why we don't have a star system, I'll never know. But like you say, we bemoan the fact that some of our top talent, most of our top talent, goes elsewhere in order to thrive and succeed. Right? Would they be the big stars that they were had they not gone down to the States? I don't think so. Why? Because the work isn't here for them. You look at Quebec. I mean, they have a star system there. They have a healthy, vibrant, thriving industry up there because they care about their culture. That is first and foremost. And they've sort of given all the people, all the Quebecers, like a reason to celebrate and enjoy and turn these actors and artists into stars, right? Because look at that model and see how they've done. And that's Canadian too. We forget about that, right?
Yeah, that's
like
true.
we don't count Quebec because they speak French. It's like we have the perfect model right in front of us. And they are government funded as well. So what we need is a government, because everything is publicly funded in that sense. The U.S. government doesn't fund jack, right? The only stuff that they fund are like, defense things or like stuff with the military that they want to sort of pump up those stories like Top Gun or whatever. And they'll go, yes, we will, absolutely will help you out help us out with the defense department. We'll give you access to all these things. But mostly they're down there because everything is self-funded. They have investors and people who are privately funding it because they want to make money.
Yeah, American content actually comes to Toronto for the tax incentives. They come to Canada for the tax incentives.
Which is why a lot of us are still busy up here. But at the same time, we're not telling our stories, right? Yeah, there's lots of work. So when the WGA strike and then the SAG strike happened, I remember hearing like on my social channels, a lot of Canadian actors saying, good, we'll take all their work then. They didn't help us. And it's so short-sighted because all the work dried up.
Yeah.
And that's because we don't have enough domestic production up here to sustain all the artists that work in the industry up in Canada, because 80-90% of the productions up here are from elsewhere because of tax breaks. Yeah. We don't have enough shows up here to sustain everybody that we have, all the talent we have up here. We don't.
Yeah.
And so, we go as the States goes. And I think we should never be dependent on another nation for our own work.
Yeah.
Right? And so.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for coming on, man. Honestly, it's such a pleasure meeting you. And I'm so glad we could get together and chat. And, I hope for Canada, for the States, for the whole world, that representation in film and cinema and TV continues to move forward. And I think it will. I think we've seen such a vast improvement even in our lifetime that hopefully by the time, I have kids and our kids grow up, that there's even more of an opening in that door that you talked about. So thank you for taking the time, man. It was so nice meeting you.
It was awesome being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe, share, and join the journey of growth untold. Don't miss a single nugget. Hit that follow button now on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram.